Guénon was fundamentally a mathematician and a metaphysician, and he constantly in his writings calls us back to the metaphysical principles of all of the theologies that are given expression to. Now, this is something I was thinking about the other day in terms of planning for this interview. I myself, of course, am Catholic, and yet what one has to understand is that metaphysics is just another word for what is true. And there is a certain resistance on the part of the average Catholic, and I think also on the part of the average Muslim and the average Hindu, to the whole idea of metaphysics. Those who get involved with metaphysics are giving expression to pride, and they really are getting into things they have no business getting into, and all you should do is say the simple prayers and not think about it. They are accused immediately of being Gnostics and other deprecatory terms. But there can be no difference between truth and the theological expression of those truths, and therefore no difference between metaphysics and the theology. And the question is whether you're going to seek the metaphysics and ignore the theology, and that poses the problem of not being part and parcel of a traditional form. And so I think a proper approach for most of us, and it may not have been the approach that Guénon used all the time, but the proper approach is that we look at the theology and try to penetrate the metaphysics that the theology is giving expression to. I don't think for many of us are gifted with that kind of metaphysical insight that Guénon had, who could go to the metaphysics without necessarily looking at the theology which gave expression to it. But I think it's much safer to do it for the average person, certainly for myself, to look at the theology and say, now, what is the metaphysics behind this? What is the deeper truth? Now, you might say, well, how do you know there's any deeper truth? Well, we know that all of Scripture, which is full of theology, is something that comes on four levels: the literal level, the moral level, the sometimes three, or at least, but usually four. And the last is the metaphysical level, or if you like, what's used in English, the mystical level. But it all depends what people mean by mystical. It's one of those words that can be abused. But again, I think there is no real conflict possible between metaphysics and theology, and yet somehow or other Guénon could, in a certain sense, say, what's the metaphysics, and therefore the theology has to be this. While most of us, I say, look at the theology and say, what is the metaphysics behind this? But this is now I'm giving what I might call expression to personal attitudes, not necessarily attitudes which would be agreed to by everybody, and not necessarily that they should agree. But again, I think what my father very clearly did was he would show that if you read St. Thomas or some of the other saints, and I was rather surprised as I've gotten to know my father's writings, some of the saints he quoted. For instance, how many Catholics have ever heard of Denis the Carthusian? And yet he would quote Denis the Carthusian. Where he came across his books, I don't know, because there are only 3 copies of his writings in this country, of which I have one, which came on the market recently. But he knew them, and he had read them, and he would quote them. And the same is, of course, true of many of the individuals he quoted when he dealt with the metaphysical basis of art. What was the particular contribution of my father? I would say there was, in a sense, twofold. First of all, he showed the absolute identity of what was taught on the deepest level by the various truly traditional forms. Now, not every religion that is comes down the pike is a traditional form. I want to make that quite clear. I mean, he was only interested in what you might call those traditions which were revealed by God, because they were a source of truth. And so, just to give you an example of this, let me take a point of contention that is frequently brought up by Catholics who believe in creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. And they say, well, the Hindus apparently believe that all creation is a manifestation of God, and they don't believe in creation ex nihilo. So along comes my father and says, well, what about this quote in St. Thomas? St. Thomas Aquinas says it makes no difference whether you say creatio ex nihilo or whether you say that all creation is a manifestation of God. You're saying exactly the same thing. Now, this is not my father's writing, but this was his great gift. He could destroy the shibboleths of false truth by quoting divergent sources of the real truth. And so I think this was his great gift. Now, the second aspect of my father's work, which I think was important, was he wrote for academics. He was himself certainly a skilled academic. There were few who could compete with him on that level. And he would write to various people in related fields, telling them the truth, and in a sense, giving them no excuse to ignore the truth. And that doesn't mean that they all agreed and accepted what he had to say, but in many cases he really, in a sense, put it to people that, hey, here's the truth, either accept it or don't. And so he had a kind of special, gentle way of explaining to people what the real issues were in life. And I think this is brought out, for instance, in a very interesting paper of his called Art, Man, and Manufacture, which was published towards the end of his life. In his writings to other scholars, they could not gainsay his scholarship, and he would tell them that what the truth was, and in a sense put it to them that they had to either get their scholarship and their truth lined up properly, or else they could go on being, in a certain sense, fakes, which is, without wishing to offend modern scholarship, many of them are, in fact, from the point of view of the purpose of life and what the craft of scholarship is involved, fakes, because scholarship should be a craft that leads one to the truth, like any genuine craft. That he was able to speak with tremendous wisdom, and that he could convey these truths with a clarity which was quite remarkable. One of the things I might mention is I think that some of the greatest writing of Schuon has not seen the light of day. This is a personal opinion, but I think his Madhakaras, his commentaries at the time when Muslims got together on Friday to pray, they might be brief, they might be only 1 or 2 pages of written material, but I find them extremely, I don't know what to say, fecund, and they touch on a variety of different topics, or facets, if you like, of the truth. And I think towards the end his Madhakaras got a little more involved with the conflicts that grew around him, but the earlier Madhakaras are still, at least in my, again, personal opinion, are still a great delight, and I would hope eventually that world wisdom might see fit to bring them out. This is where I see the essence of Schuon, more than even in his books. His books were necessary. They dealt with particular problems, but The Madhakara somehow went to the heart of the matter in a very special way. Titus Burckhardt, he was just an all-around extraordinary person. I met him on several occasions. I think his writing is extremely remarkable. And I remember he gave the book on on Siena. He gave that to Pope Pius XII, and I remember his mentioning to me how impressed he was with Pius XII, how saintly he thought he was. I can add that I think his writings are among the most significant of the various contributors. I think he had the clearest insight, and if you like, the most pertinent and accurate way of translating the principles of Guénon, my father, and Schuon into the practical sphere as an architect and as a person traveling the spiritual path. Well, I think Marco Pallis was in many ways a stepfather for me because I kind of lived with him in both India and in England, and I remain and retain a certain veneration for him, which is related to the personal relationship as well as to his writings. I think his book, Peaks and Lamas, which I wish could be republished, is an important book. The time I spent with him in Sikkim was, for me personally, very profitable, including the visit to the abbot of Lachen and getting to see the kind of Tibetan Buddhist life, which he had led. I think he's an extremely important author, and in a sense I think he has been able to penetrate the academic world in a way that Schuon and Guénon have not. What happens with Guénon is very often they take one look at him and say, oh no, that's too dense for us, we can't get into that. They look at Schuon and they say, oh, that's too spiritual, we can't get into that. And so Nasr, in a sense, is able to penetrate that academic world, not only because of his own credentials, but because he can speak their language better than Guénon could or Schuon could. And that's fine, and I think that's a wonderful gift.